Executive Director of Power the Future on top 2019 energy and climate stories and issues. Daniel Turner, welcome to the Schilling Show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's talk about, first of all, your organization, Power the Future. Would you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. PowerTheFuture.com, I started it about a year ago for the sole purpose of advocating for America's energy workers. And I do that by calling out the radical green movement that threatens their jobs, their communities, their way of life.
So we could surmise from that you are no fan of the Green New Deal, so-called.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the big issues for 2019 for all the candidates who are running for the primary. There is some green in the Green New Deal. There is some lip service to renewable energy sources, et cetera. But really, it's just an enormous takeover of industry, of healthcare, education, et cetera. When you get into the details of the Green New Deal, it's really just a statist document. It's an absolute power grab by the radical left. But it's done under the guise of the environment, and that's how the leftists have always succeeded. They do it in the name of caring for the earth, caring for the planet, and they get away with destructive policies.
Indeed, they do. Daniel Turner is our guest. 977-1070 is a phone number. So it's interesting because climate, you mentioned climate politics, but climate has become political, and people like you and people like me who don't buy into all of these lies and we see what's going on, we're called deniers, and there are efforts being made to not only silence us, but to prosecute or persecute us.
Yeah, it's amazing that there are people in elected office. Probably the most notable is a senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse, who is calling for prosecution of people who deny climate change. And so they will use phrases like the science is settled or there is no debate. It's really a way just to cut off any opposition of their agenda. And the fact of the matter is the science is not settled, and there is an awful lot of room for debate. And any group of people who want to use the coercive power of government to take over an industry, take over things like people's jobs and livelihoods by having the state grab oil, gas, coal reserves, et cetera, there has to be a lot of debate on that in America before people just roll over and acquiesce to government intervention.
Daniel, one of the things that's been going on here, in some ways quietly behind the scenes but welcome, is the rollback of a lot of regulations. And yet every time we see this happening, or almost every time, there's an impertinent lawsuit. And this is one of the things you say, regulatory lawsuits, going to be in the news this year.
Exactly. There has never been a real national appetite for climate policies. If your listeners even recall, back in 2009, when President Obama was newly inaugurated with a supermajority in the Senate and all of his popularity, they were not able to get cap and trade passed. And in fact, Senate Majority Leader back then, Harry Reid, didn't even bring it to the floor for a vote because he knew it would be destroyed. So since there is no national appetite for legislation, what the Obama administration did was use executive fiat, a lot of executive orders, a lot of regulations, and President Trump has just rolled them back one by one. He's been challenged at the courts every time, and that is why you saw green groups spend millions and tens of millions of dollars to stop Justice Kavanaugh, because they realized he would vote probably in opposition of a powerful executive branch. The president does not have executive authority to put in these types of industry-crushing regulations. And so as you see these lawsuits come through, there's a lot of hope in people like me that as they'll work their way up to the Supreme Court, and then the decision should come down in favor of freedom, industry, and prosperity.
I want to go international for a second here and talk about the consequences of elections in Brazil and also Australia. What's going on with those two places that could change things up?
There's a lot of optimism in Brazil with its new president, Bolsonaro. He will probably have a lot of a Trump effect there in rolling back some of their energy policy as well. Energy is a difficult issue because it is a global commodity and it is traded on the global scale. And so as new countries or developing countries come online more and more, India, China, et cetera, there is an increased demand in energy in their nations. Similarly, Venezuela is down roughly 600,000 barrels of oil a day from where they should be, and that is because of the Chavez regime, the Maduro regime, et cetera, and that is impacting oil as well. What's notable is that right now, relatively speaking, gas prices are pretty cheap. Oil is still pretty cheap, and that is all because of America. That is American entrepreneurism, American rugged individualism and spirit, and an administration that is allowing us to explore our own oil. Studies have come out just in the last day or so that America will be 100% energy independent by 2020. We are already exporting oil right now, and it is a great geopolitical power to be in a position that we do not need any other nation to supply our energy. A lot of countries don't have that. One of our greatest allies is Israel. They are 100% energy dependent on other nations. Germany is dependent on Russia. President Trump made a big deal about that during his NATO visit last year. Right, so for America to be in a position that we are 100% energy independent is an extraordinary position of political leverage and power and a force for good in the world.
Just a couple minutes left. We're talking with Daniel Turner at Power the Future on top 2019 energy and climate issues. You talk about oil and the price of gasoline right now here locally. We're paying maybe $1.89 or something like that at the cheap gas station, which is really, really inexpensive, relatively speaking. But what about oil demand going forward right now? Because there are certain things that are not using oil as much anymore, particularly plastics.
Yeah, a lot of people, there was an Axios report talking about how plastics will be on the way down. I think there's a lot of speculation in that and an awful lot of, again, environmentalist hopefulness.
Right.
I'm talking to you right now on a smartphone that's 100% basically plastic with a little bit of silver in it, right? The amount of plastics we use in all of our industry and even our jackets, it's wintertime, right? Petrochemicals are in your gloves and coats and hats. So it is a little bit wishful thinking to say we will just stop using these products. One of the reasons why they are pushing this agenda is they say there's a lot of plastic in the Pacific. Absolutely there is. There's a tremendous amount of garbage in the Pacific Ocean, but 95% of it comes from China and India and Malaysia and Indonesia. So why are we banning straws in America? I live in Washington, D.C. We have a straw ban now. Why are we compromising our quality of life, right? And this is the radicalness of the environmental left, that they want to affect change in our country. They have the sense of guilt that we are somehow contributing to global climate change or global pollution, when in fact we're not. Our emissions are lower, our planet, our Earth is cleaner. America is not a polluting country, but yet we have these political leaders and an environmental movement that is punishing us for what other nations are doing. And quite frankly, people are going to start pushing back. Look at the Yellow Vest movement in France, right? When the president of France, Macron, put on huge taxes on the price of gas because of climate change, people literally died. There have been several deaths in those very violent protests because people are angry. Americans have in their DNA this innate sense of pushing back against a government that taxes us too much. That's how we were formed. So if these environmentalists get into power and try to push that agenda here, Americans will push back.
Daniel Turner, if people want to follow you online or get more information on Power the Future, tell us quickly how they can do that.
Thank you. It's powerthefuture.com, or follow us at @PowerTheFuture on Twitter. And I'm so grateful for the chance to be on your show.
I appreciate your advocacy, and I thank you so much for joining us today on the Schilling Show.